Good morning, sixth graders. Today we are going to be learning about writing expressions. So the next page in your interactive notebook, you're going to label your page number, whichever page comes next. So you're going to do the next two pages and you're going to label it writing expressions. So important vocabulary to remember is what is an algebraic expression. So an algebraic expression is an expression that contains a variable, an operation, and a constant. Then we need to know what a switch phrase is. A switch phrase are keywords that tell you to switch the order of the terms. This usually happens with division and subtraction because that's where that order matters. With addition and multiplication, remember, the commutative property says that order doesn't matter, but order does matter with subtraction and division. So you can follow these three steps when you're writing an algebraic expression. So you're going to translate a word phrase into an algebraic expression. You're going to look for the operation keywords. So you're going to look for those keywords that tell you whether to add, subtract, multiply, or divide. You can help choose the correct operation. Fill in two keywords for each operation. So some examples are sum, greater than, altogether. You can keep going if you know more. For subtraction, we have less than, the difference, fewer, and keep going if you can think of more words. Multiplication, product times of are all very common ones. Division, quotient, divided by, split are all very common ones. Shared, those are going to be your main key phrases for each of those operations. If a variable is given, that variable must be used. If no variable is given, you may choose any variable that you like, but try to stay away from some of those variables that can be confused as operation symbols. Addition and multiplication are commutative, just like we talked about yesterday. so the order of the terms does not matter. A number or variable right next to one another means to multiply. So it'll look something like that. So 5x means 5 times x, or 6n means 6 times n. Subtraction and division are not commutative. So order does matter when you're working with division and subtraction. Some examples of switch phrases are less than, goes into, and subtracted from. So those are going to be some of those phrases that you need to switch the order of the numbers as they appear in the written out phrase. So let's look at some examples on your next page. So we have the sum of 5 and g. So it gives us our variable, so we need to use that variable g. So we're going to write out 5 plus g. And remember, it's an expression, so there are no equal signs. Expressions do not have equal signs. Number 2, our keyword is product. So we're going to multiply. So there's a couple different ways. Excuse me. So there's a couple of different ways that we could write this out. But we want to stay away from the X symbol as multiplication right now because we're now getting into variables. So for multiplication, we either want to use that dot, the star, parentheses, or we can just write the number next to the variable. So we could do 8k, 8 times k. We could do 8 parentheses k, or we can do 8 star k. Okay, our next one, number 3, is less than. Remember, less than is one of those switch phrases. So we want to know what is 7 less than W. So we need to make sure that W comes first. W minus 7 would be the correct way to write out that expression. 8 divided by Y. So we don't need to switch it. That's not one of those switch phrases. So we could write it a couple of different ways again. So we can do 8 divided by Y, or we can do 8 over Y. Either way would be correct. So now we have number 5. Difference means to subtract, but it's not one of those switch phrases. So we would just write 12 minus D. And now we're going to get into a little bit more complicated of one. We have a couple of different steps. So we have 5 greater than the product. So we have greater than and product of 6 and H. So greater than means to add. So we'd have 5 plus, then we have product of 6 and H. So we want to write it out either like this or 5 plus 6 times H. Okay, I want you guys to write or to solve these problems, and then we will go over the correct answers. Okay, number 7 says B split into 14 equal groups. So that means we're going to take B divided by 14. So you could write it B divided by 14 or B over 14. Number 8 says 5 less than the product of 1/2 and J. So less than, remember that's one of those switch phrases, so that's going to become last. So we have -5, but don't forget that product part. So we have 1/2 times J minus 5. Then number 9, G squared increased by 8. So increased is going to be adding, but remember we have G to the power of 2, or squared, plus 8. Then number 10, we have M, decreased by 1/2 of N. So that's going to be a multi-step one again. So we have M minus 1/2 of N. So we can do either 1/2 times N, or we can do M minus N divided by 2, or M minus N divided by 2. As remember, we have to follow the order of operations in order to solve these, but we can use any way to write them out. And the last one is a word problem, so we're going to have to search a little bit harder for our information. Tickets to the amusement park cost $12 for adults and $8 for kids. Write an algebraic expression to show the cost of A, adults, and K, kids. So we have to think, how do we find out how much it costs for so many adults to go? Well, it's going to cost 12 times A. And how many kids? It's going to be 8 times K. And to find the total, we're going to have to add those together. So it's going to be 12A plus 8K. Okay, so you're going to continue this practice with your assignment today. Check Google Classroom for more information.